Nelson, and you're listening to the Starting Block Podcast. Guys, this is a show for complete athletic development. The objective here is to give you the tools to win, whether you're the athlete, the parent, or the coach. As always, I'm here with my co-host, Chris Scarborough. What's up, man? How are you?
Hey, good afternoon, guys.
Guys, if you're new to the show, welcome. I appreciate you joining. You will find very quickly that we are different than your standard podcast, guys. You will actually find multiple shows within the show here. The first type of episode you're going to get from us is going to be a bi-weekly Q&A. That's where Chris and I will take the questions y'all submit to us, and we'll tackle them there. It can be anything related to the training, performance, the rehab, the neuro, the voodoo stuff. It can be questions you might have about our guests and some of the conversations we had with them. Totally fine. Shoot those questions to us, and we'll tackle them on that episode, guys. You can reach me at Farmer John ELP on Instagram. And Chris, where can they get you?
Fast and Agile 49 on Instagram.
Are the cops coming for you there, Chris?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
Okay.
So better make it quick.
Yeah. All right. Got it. All right. So that's Q&A. The next bi-weekly episode you'll get from us is a guest interview. That's what we got today, and we'll bring our guest on here in just a second. Guys, the guest interview is really cool, I think, the way that we do it, simply because this is the type of episode we're going to bring on people that share the same core values and mission that we do, and ultimately can become a place, or people that you can network with, people that believe the same things that we do. And, ultimately, it's been really cool to see how that network has grown really across the world. So we appreciate all the guests that have been on in the past, all the ones that are coming, and honestly, you guys for connecting with all these people and helping grow their companies and businesses as well. So that's our first two episodes, and then you'll get either a third or fourth one, just kind of depending on the type of mood that I'm in. You might get that Friday Fire. You might get the Athlete Spotlight. If we can get all that reorganized, we'll keep bringing that to you. Aside from that, guys, we don't run any ads on the show at the moment. I'm not saying we won't ever. We just don't right now. So we do appreciate that if you got value out of this, that you just share the show, bring us a friend, and help us grow this thing. That's really all we ask. So that's all the housekeeping stuff. I think I got it covered. Chris, are you still with us, or did you get arrested?
No, I'm good to go. Yeah,
Okay. All right, cool.
I just threw somebody else under the bus, so
Okay,
we're good.
Awesome. All right, well, let's get right to it, man. Let's get this thing rolling. So, all that's gone. We got a guest interview today, and we're pleased to bring on co-founder of OVR Performance and director of Westside vs. the World, Mr. Michael Fahey. What's up, bro?
Thanks. How you doing?
Hey,
Good,
thanks
man.
for coming on, Michael.
Absolutely. So, kind of funny thing here, which I think, as you said off air, this is not the first time that somebody's done that to you. We're sitting here talking before the show, guys, and in the back of my head, I'm like, man, this guy's name, like, it sounds really familiar, but like I could not figure out why. And then we started talking, and he just drops like super casually, just super chill, like, oh yeah, I'm also the director of Westside vs. the World. It's like, oh, that's mic drop right there, man. So yeah, we had no idea that we had you coming on. We thought we were just talking about OVR Performance, but I guess we got a celebrity in the house now, man. So, yeah. So Chris had originally sent me the info, like, OVR, check these guys out. And like, I've seen you guys all over social media. I feel like you're blowing up everywhere. I think you have a great business product in seemingly a market that really needs it. But so I want to talk about everything today. I got 1,000 questions.
Good. I got answers.
I guess, why don't we just start from the beginning, man? Like, what got you into this industry? How'd you get here?
Well, when I'll try and make it as brief as possible. I'm known for talking.
Well, we got an hour, and so like I'll interrupt you.
That's brief slow to me. So, so basically, I'm from Tallahassee, Florida, hence a lot of the FSU stuff.
You stole our coach, Mike Norvell.
Yeah. I like Mike and his
crew. He might be coming back to Memphis if things don't change down there.
Well, I hope he gets it. I hope he gets it back together. We were really, really excited about where the program was moving for a couple of years there, and hopefully they get it back, because I live here in Tallahassee now again.
Okay,
that's where I'm from. I grew up. I went to Florida State. I went to Florida State originally for film. Prior to that, I was very close to going to play football in college. I'm rather large. I grew up lifting with my dad, who was a big Westside barbell fan. We had like the first reverse hyper in the state of Florida, probably the first belt squat. Dave Tate did some of Elite FTS's first off-site seminars where he really traveled. My dad kind of hoodwinked him into doing those in our garage. So like Dave Tate taught me how to box squat when I was like 12 or 13 years old. And at the time, like none of this was, I went to go visit Westside for the first time when I was 12. um, while I was in Cleveland for track and field nationals. I was a thrower, and my dad used that as an excuse to get me down to Columbus and stop by Westside when it was in the blacked out strip mall gym. Um, and at the time, like, the internet was in its infancy. There's no social media. No one knew who any of these people were.
What a great time to be alive, wasn't it?
Yeah. So that's the era that I was still like raised in. I'm 38, so we didn't get phones and stuff until I was, I didn't get a phone until I was a senior in high school, and it didn't do anything fun. No one texted you.
No, you could play Snake on it, maybe.
Not on mine.
That's about all we could do.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, we're the same age, so
Yeah.
Like I remember, like my Nokia phones, and like the coolest thing you could do is like change the cover. You could put like your favorite college team on there. Like that's all it could ever do.
I just had a brick that would
I have
die.
no idea what you guys are talking about. So.
That's because Chris, you had the cell phone that was in the backpack. That you had to buy for like $20,000, and you put in your car.
Yeah.
Oh no! I was along way before that. So no, that was that was years later.
Yeah. But so I just like happened to, mostly because of my dad, who was a stockbroker who played semi-pro football until he was 37, just because he wanted to hit people. Like the leagues never paid out their money and stuff. So he just did it for fun, had his 9-to-5 job, and then built this incredible gym in our home. So this was just a thing that I completely took for granted. I got, this super high level training that changed my life. And I went from, a kid who was generally unathletic, to finally getting no playing time on my freshman year in high school. And got really irritated by that. Went and told my dad, like, hey, we're just going to train like animals. All this stuff you've been trying to get me to do for years. Now I want to do it. I want vengeance. I was like, I want to force them to have to play me on JV football. And I messed up because my sophomore season, I ran out to the JV field and they said, Fahey, what the hell are you doing? You're on the wrong field. You're with varsity now. And I was a two-way varsity starter for basically 3 years. And
Nice.
The whole goal was just, I'm going to make them have to play me on JV. And I completely overshot and ended up being 6'3", 243 pounds and pretty athletic, and had some fairly large D1 offers, and just had...
So did you go play college ball?
No. So it was literally back then, we didn't have early signing days. So it was like in February when signing day came around, I just played in an all-star game. I was looking at, my dad had played at Princeton, so I was looking at sort of following that route. And I had looked at, Columbia had just had a kid graduate from film school and play football. They wanted me, but then everyone told me, well, you can't do film school and play football. And I just gotten into my head that I want to go make movies. And meanwhile, Florida State had like the best film school in the Southeast. So I was like,
Burt Reynolds.
Yeah, we had Burt and everybody.
Yeah.
So I was like, if I'm going to go to college, I want to go do something that I'm passionate about. And I sort of talked my way into the film school only for massive budget cuts to force 10 kids to get kicked out of the film school. It was a small program to begin with, but I was the last one in, so I was the first one kicked out at the end of my freshman year. They also told me I couldn't walk on for track to throw. So I was literally watching track and field nationals as FSU won the national championship. I'm watching one of my high school friends that I threw against, Matt Wernke, holding the trophy for 2 seconds above his head as they pass it around. And my dad calls and says, hey, you've got a letter from the film school. Yeah, I know he had already read it because the tone in his voice, he was like, do you want me to read this to you? I'm literally across town. I'm like just off campus watching this. And he reads to me that I've been kicked out. And so, had a minor existential crisis, ended up in a program called media production, which is basically the same thing. Just you have to explain it at parties. You could say like, I'm a film school kid, and people go, ooh, an artist. And then instead you're like, I'm a media production kid. And you push up your glasses and try to explain. It's
Right.
like the film school, but no one knows. And we use digital media. It's actually more future proof. And um, so I ended up graduating first in my class in that. I really loved the program, really loved my professors. Moved out to LA the day after I graduated. Worked on a movie called that. It's actually the biggest thing that I've ever been a part of, called Forks Over Knives, a plant-based diet documentary, which is kind of, it spurred the whole, like, this was in 2010. It spurred the whole, like, plant-based vegan, like, explosion around then. It was the most watched.
So you're the problem. So you're part of the reason for that.
It's just the Midas touch that I have. I was,
Okay, well then I guess this interview's over.
Yeah,
Like,
I was
we're done. You're the reason for people being vegan. Awesome, thanks, man.
But yeah, that and the ascension of Amazon, but we won't get into that. Yeah, we partnered with Whole Foods, and it was right when Whole Foods was being bought by Amazon.
Yeah.
But so that movie, I was just a hired gun on it. I was an intern, worked my way up because people kept quitting because they didn't want to work on it. And eventually I was at the bottom of the organization, and everyone between me and the top quit, but like one by one. And so eventually I was just a like 22-year-old or maybe 23 by then in an apartment in Santa Monica editing this movie that I thought no one will ever see this. I wasn't even an editor. I was like, I learned how to do this in school, but I've never had a real job out here before. I'm living this weird fantasy life, literally in a one-bed studio apartment in an apartment complex in Santa Monica while I was living way over in like Glendale and Pasadena, which is a very long ways away from one another through a lot of colossal traffic. But that movie ended up coming out. By then I had gone to work at the NFL Network. The movie comes out. It hits Netflix. This is back before like House of Cards and stuff. Netflix didn't have original properties. And they didn't have a whole lot of content, period. So back then, documentaries were like king. And ours somehow rose to the top of the heap. And we were literally like the most watched thing on Netflix for about 4 years. And then they launched House of Cards, and that finally kicked it off. But this thing that I had worked on for a couple of years and then moved on from, it caught fire after I left. So literally I'd be in, I went to a job interview once, and this producer, they're interviewing me, and on the shelf behind them was like an autographed copy of Forks Over Knives. And they're going through like my resume and stuff, and they say like, oh, what did you do on that? And I was like, I was the editor. If you like, it was like they weren't putting together that it was they weren't looking at the title, just at like the credit. And I was like, it's on your shelf. It's right. My name's on the packaging. Like, and sort of a similar thing happened where I left. And they had like very quickly kind of ushered me out, like I wasn't going to get this job. And then they called me back several hours later and like apologized. We're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize that you were telling me you did that movie. I love it, blah, blah, blah. And it was just like sort of a job for me. I went vegan while doing it to like understand what it was about, but which is sort of part of anything that I do. I want to know what it's about. So that wasn't my passion. I was just a hired gun on it, but I wanted to know. I ended up at the NFL for a few years, doing mostly combine coverage related stuff and off-season kind of scouting stuff. And again, it was weird because in LA, most of the people are tiny who like work in production. Like actors are usually small people. Everyone's shorter than you would expect, and I'm 6'3" and probably still like 230, 240 at that time. And so I'm this hulking giant that like I look like one of the ex-NFL players who is just kind of getting a job there or something, like trying to intern in media. And then I would go into a little dungeon hole in an edit bay. And at the time they liked that they didn't have to give me an assistant to like, because they literally had assistants assigned to all the editors who would just explain the sport of football to them. It's like that's sort of how rare.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
I
Right.
can see that.
but that's kind of how rare that like crossover. Again, I'm from Tallahassee. Everyone knows football, but no.
So did you get involved with like the NFL film side of it? Like, is that where, like, I know you said you did combine work, but
Yeah,
in
so
the sports world, we all know that like NFL films is legendary.
yeah, so NFL
the
Films.
music.
Yeah, NFL Films is headquartered out of like New Jersey, or at least back then it was.
Okay.
So they did the film side, and I was at the network side. So like the live TV. I got to edit like some, like I did. This is back when Peyton Manning broke his neck, and I was like, he's coming back. This is the same thing that Chris Winkie had, again, FSU. And I was like, he came back and won the national championship after it. Like, but at the time they thought.
So go ahead.
But I edited this big career. It was the coolest thing I ever got to do there. And of course, the Colts let him go. He comes back with the Broncos and extends his career by a few years, and they have to trash that whole project, which the whole time I was like, no one's ever going to see this. It's cool that y'all want me to come work on this every day, but no one's going to ever watch it. And from there, I went and worked on a Bobby Bowden documentary that eventually turned into the Bowden Dynasty, a film that came out like 2017, 2018-ish. And then 2018, I finished Westside vs. the World. I had started Westside vs. the World because I was just tired of kind of working on projects for other people. So, again, having this familiarity with Westside, kind of knowing the players involved, I had told the story of Westside Barbell to people who worked with me in passing, because I'd wear a Westside hoodie all the time. And they'd say, why does the dog have balls? Referring to the back of the hoodie.
I don't think I've ever noticed that.
Oh, yeah. I think they've neutered Nitro on the newer shirts. I wish they would bring back the OG shirts with the balls on the back.
That.
Yeah.
I have an old Westside Barbell shirt.
Yeah, look
I'll
at the
have to go
back.
look.
Look at the reverse.
I've never
of,
paid attention to that.
yeah.
Well, what a wild journey to like. I mean, I can understand. I mean, maybe you understand the importance of the movie that you produced, but as a fan, like I think the movie you produced is our generation's pumping iron, and I mean it's going to last in infamy for years. And so you did a great job, man. Like your movie was excellent, and I mean just as a fan from day one of learning it was going to come out, I know you guys went through a lot of struggles. I know there are a lot of ups and downs with it. But when it came out, I think it honestly is going to influence a generation of kids years and years and years down the road. And people 40 years from now are going to watch that and be like, oh man, that's like pumping iron back in the 70s. What, I don't know. What was that spirit? Like you already knew Louie, you knew, Dave, those guys but just what was that experience like? And obviously that influenced you into getting into the career that you're in now, which we want to spend a good, probably half of this podcast discussing.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious, like, what was the experience like for you?
It was really transformative from, my intention going in was kind of like, I'm going to show the world what I can do when I'm in charge, basically. Like I'm going to execute my vision and I'm going to do something that's of my own creation. And all the headaches, like I didn't think it would be easy or anything, but I was like, but all the headaches will be my own fault. And all of the...
It's a blessing and a curse.
Yeah. But all of the headaches and then all of the sort of solutions and everything that came out of it would be me. And, like just having my destiny in my own hands. But as I started doing it, again, at this point, I had been working in LA for maybe like 7 years. I had finished a couple documentaries. I'd done tons of TV work. And the movie in large part, the movie started because what really like tipped me over the edge was one person who I won't name, because they know well enough that I was right. But they said, you'll be lucky if 5,000 people ever watch that. And I got really upset. I wasn't committed to doing it at the time, and I got really upset that they said that because I was like, their whole business is within that that realm of they cater to a lot of power lifters. And I was like, how do you say, like, I was like, you have more than 5,000 customers to your site. You know, like, yeah, I was like, if I do this, like, you'll be one of the major beneficiaries of it. And that's in a lot of ways, like, I work off of sort of two lists in my head. One list, and I tell this to kids all the time, like, to keep two lists. One list is the people who basically you're doing something in spite of. And, you know, like when you need like just a little bit of push, or, you know, like FU-edness to get you through like a short hurdle, you reach for that list. And then the other list is people who, like, there's, you know, so one list is the people who doubted you. The other list is the people who believed in you. And that's when you're like really at your darkest, lowest points. Like you think about your sort of obligation to the people who believed in whatever it is that you're doing, who believed in like your ability to do it. But so anyways, in that moment, it was very much like the doubted me list. And I put this person on it and was like, I'm going to show you, because I'm going to go make this movie, and you're going to not only watch this movie, you're going to have to talk about this movie for probably the rest of your life.
Well, that type, I think, like all the greats, like Michael and Kobe, and guys like Tim Grover, they talk about that. That's that dark side energy.
Yeah,
you know, you got to be able to tap into that dark energy, and all the great people have it.
Yeah. But
you know, Michael, I wish my son was on this podcast. He's a filmmaker. He doesn't do it much, but he's done a few like local feature films with very, very, very small budget, and, you know, but when you begin to see the how much work goes into something like that, I can only imagine.
Yeah,
you know, what you probably put together in order to put, you know, to do this documentary. Now I got to go see it, of course.
Yeah,
but you know, it's but I do find it interesting though.
It's on Netflix, I think.
Yeah, it was. If it's back on Netflix,
where's it now?
I don't know. I have a distributor. They arrange all the terms. So it was on Netflix. The term ended. Then it was on Amazon Prime as one of the free Prime movies. Their term ended. You know, it could be on Tubi. I have no clue where it is. You know, you can always rent it, or there's usually some Brazilian account that's bootlegged it on YouTube that we keep having to take it down. And to get further into like, you know, OVR and stuff, it's like, it's kind of a lot harder to bootleg a physical product. So that's,
sure.
Just making the whole movie, like documentaries take so long, and I edit them. I'm a crazy person in terms of my process in making a movie. I shoot about, my average film is like 200 hours of interviews, usually from like 30 to 40 different sources. And then I, for whatever reason, and I'm finishing a film now that will probably be my last film that I have any intention, at least at this point, of making. But I did the same thing, and this is why movies take so long for me. I don't work off of scripts, and I don't do transcriptions. So I have 200 hours of interviews, and I kind of just remember where the sound bites are. Like, oh, it's in this file in this folder, and it's in this 30-minute chunk. And I go like, I told one coach once, they said, you know, well, I've written books. And I said, I've written a movie that's way harder. It's like writing a book, but you have to use Scrabble tiles that you pull out of a bucket. And then at the end of it, a lawyer has to comb through it and validate every single thing that I put in it. And I have to have sources I have citations for literally every word. I have 2 citations. I was like, so someone tells a story in the middle of the movie, it's like, not only am I having to use only the words really that they gave me, but then I have to go confer, like, this did reasonably happen with these other people. And like, so I've got crazy stories that I won't put on, you know, like I won't put in the movie because, you know, they're of sort of dubious sourcing, but they're crazy, and they would be, you know, they're really fun to tell off air.
super entertaining,
Yeah.
but yeah, you can't. Yeah, the legitimacy, would not lend
Yeah.
itself to a film. So, but so here's what I think. What's interesting, because you know, my first experience with the whole Westside system
Mm-hmm.
did kind of lend itself to I'm going to kind of segue this into your products. That was the first time I ever recall hearing of what we now call a velocity based system. Louie was kind of the original lifter. I'm going to weightlifting, not the original. The first one I recall using velocity as a regular training system, especially using bands and things a lot, or chains, and that was the first time I'd ever really come across that. So
Yeah.
Interestingly, probably when you were 12, I mean, that was probably my first, that's probably about when I had an experience with them as well. And I did find that very interesting. Did that have some inspiration as far as the developing?
Yeah, it had a ton. So yeah, Louie was the first person really in the West to, I think, talk extensively about, tendos. And if you read, like, the whole concept of, say, dynamic effort, and the whole story that goes into, he'd experimented with linear basically in the 60s, and where he was just following sets and reps and weekly progressions, and not really understanding why he was segueing from this many sets and this many reps on this week to this week. It was just sort of this, like, it's a theoretical model that isn't really based on a real scientific principle. It's based more along organizing concepts so that they conceptually make sense in people's heads, but it doesn't really have a lot to do with physiologically, like how anything really works. But so he did that, and then he had a catastrophic failure in his training, and he broke his back. He invents the reverse hyper, and he gets himself back to the point of being a top-tier lifter. It takes years, but, so he has a problem. He invents a solution to the outcome of the problem. He invents a fix, and even to say that he invents, he constructs, a physical object that allows him to do a thing that he had read about. And Louis would be the first to tell you, like, I didn't invent, he says in the movie, I didn't invent toilet paper, but I'm smart enough to use it. But then after 4 or 5 years, he has another catastrophic failure within his training, and he breaks his back again. By that point in time, he had started around, I believe, like 76, experimenting with a lot of, like, Bulgarian type concepts, doing daily maxes. So he's, and as a power lifter, as opposed to being a weightlifter, your daily maxes are going to be at a much slower velocity, and they're a much heavier, more intense stimulus. So the fatigue from them is different. You can do daily maxes if you're cleaning or snatching. Those are relatively light. They're relatively fast. But Louis realized, like, oh, I'm like, I can go do reverse hypers again, but he started to realize there's a cycle to, I can fix my back, but what's actually hurting my back? It's the outcome of this huge accumulation of training. So it's like the failure doesn't happen in an instant. It's the outcome of this long process. And he looked around at all the other lifters and saw how they were all failing in a similar manner. How, and he realized, like, okay, I can keep relying on this, like, Band-Aid of just doing a reverse hypers. But how many times is a Band-Aid gonna fix it? Because by that point, he's in his 30s. And he wanted to lift forever. He wanted to lift until he was done. And everyone else kind of, all the raw lifters of his day and age, they'd have like a 6 to 8 year run, and then they would be so broken they couldn't really compete anymore. So he's like, I want to figure out what's happening. And that's where he started to, around 82, get into all the Soviet books and stuff and realize, there's percentage-based concepts. But those percentage-based concepts, the Soviets already knew back then, they already knew that those percentages were really just proxies for velocity. So, you can move a lighter weight faster, you move a heavier weight slower. Well, if you move a heavier weight slower, that means you have more time under tension. And that's, all training kind of devolves down into that, like, you're trying to move fast enough to move fast. You're trying to move slow enough to actually create the tension that's going to make you stronger. And so as he started to create that framework for himself, that's where max effort and dynamic effort start to bifurcate and have distinct purposes. And the stronger you get, the faster your dynamic effort needs to get, because your force velocity curve is growing. It's encompassing like a larger area. So if you watch, like, I'm good friends with Dave Hoff, who's the #1 multiply powerlifter of all time by 10,000 miles. If you watch him do his speed work, he lifts 85% top weight significantly faster than, as a 1,300-pound squatter, basically. He lifts it much faster than a 1,200-pound squatter or an 1,100-pound squatter. He lifts the same percentage faster. But so as he gets stronger, he's capable of grinding slower. A young athlete can't grind very slow. Their brain just shuts them down, so they might hit 3 reps pretty fast, and you add 5 pounds and everything shuts down because the governor on their brain simply cuts them off at the velocity where their 1 rep max would theoretically exist. So yeah, I saw this was all stuff that I just like. This was the basic framework of how I was taught all lifting as a middle and high schooler. And I didn't know what anyone else really was getting taught. I would look sometimes at, like, I was a pretty good football player. I was pretty highly recruited. Everyone who trained with me in my little garage gym group, I mean, we had top 10 NFL draft picks who came out of that group. Everyone went to, Clemson or Michigan State or big programs. And then I just decided, like, I'm going to make movies instead. But so I had this in the back of my head, and like a lot of people and a lot of things, because it was just presented to me, and this is something that I bet like every coach listening can empathize with, because when you give a kid like good coaching, kid does not know that they have good coaching. No,
that's a fact.
No one recognizes how special the things in their immediate vicinity are. In order to recognize how special they are, you have to have like extremely high sort of like self-worth. You have to believe that you are special in order to just accept that the things within arm's length might also be special. And that's a big part of me, like, moving back to Tallahassee is, like, I think that the place I'm from, not that it's more, I kind of think like everyone is inherently special and capable of being special, whatever. But so as I got out into the world and I start making Westside versus the world, like, I got into all these talks with Louie, and I was so fast. I was like so much more interested in the workings of the training. And so I have, 200 hours of interviews, but like I got to interview Buddy Morris, and there's maybe a minute and a half of that is in the movie. There's 3.5 hours of
that's my only critique, man.
Yeah. Well, there's like 3.5 hours of me and him that's in his kitchen out in Arizona. And
breaking news: you said you're going to put together a movie just to him, right? No, I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
That's on me, guys. I did not. He did not say that. I know we all want it. Okay,
I feel like Buddy would
we
hit
all want
me
it.
if I even attempted that. But like, I milked it. That like anytime. I mean, I'm sure y'all do like the same thing with a podcast. You invite somebody on, and like half the time at least, it's got to be, I want to talk to this person, and so the podcast just becomes like a a means to justify having the conversation that you want to have otherwise. The movie is the same way, only it's like a much like mightier weapon to draw these people in. So I was like, I can literally just open up my phone and talk to basically anyone I've ever wanted to talk to regarding training. And of course, when I get there, I'm like, okay, yeah, so how did you meet Louie? What did you do? Blah, blah, blah. But then I'm like, how did you tailor this? How did you tailor what Louie taught you to your field athletes? How did you get that done in a team setting? I know the template. And I also, every day while I was there for, in and out for 3 or 4 years shooting, I might shoot the morning crew because that's like the story of the gym. And then I'd interview Louie for 2 or 3 hours in these big formalized interviews. But then I'd see coaches coming in from around the world and I'd listen to him, tell them, well, here's what I would do in your situation. Here's what I would do here. Here's what I'd do, oh yeah, you got to do triples. Not, our guys do 1 rep max. You got to do triples. And listening to sort of all the translations as he would reverse engineer his own thing for them. And as they would ask him, he'd say sometimes, someone would come in and ask what seemed to everyone else in the room to be like a very stupid question. And he'd say, that's where you learn the most. And he says, because I have enough sense that I never would have, it's a thing that happens constantly of someone asks you something and they make a comparison that you're like, wow, you really don't understand what I'm talking about at all. But simultaneously in that moment where you're trying to contextualize it for them, where they got 2 things that you've said wrong or they got them confused, and you go, I've never looked at these 2 things before. I've had both of these pieces of information in my head. I know both of these things. But now as I'm talking to you, I'm forced to reconcile these 2 things in a way that I've never done before because my thought process never pushed me to do that. And now I'm forced to answer my logic through your eyes. And suddenly I'm thinking about, I've had all these pieces in my head before. It's almost like when you need to go grocery shopping and you're looking through your pantry and you're like, I've got some Mexican components and some Asian components and, these are the dishes that are washed currently. And then all of a sudden you're like, I'm making a new fusion recipe here. Because at the end of the day, it's just heat and pressure that do all the cooking. It's, it's chemistry, just like training. Someone asks, well, what would you do here? And you go, well, I do this. And then they say, well, we don't have that. We only have this. And all of a sudden you have to consider circumstance that you don't have. But so I'm watching these coaches come in and have these conversations, and some of them are NFL and MLB and, pro rugby coaches, and people are coming from all over the world. And this really weird thing is happening where I'm like, I'm talking to Louie and I'm like, most of these people have no clue what you're saying. And it's because they're having to sort of unlearn the language of training that they're accustomed to. Meanwhile, I was brought up by a dude who sort of sounds and speaks just like Louie on Louie's writings and stuff. So I'm like, I get this language that you're saying, and I'm also shocked at how difficult some of these concepts are for people to grasp. And they sound, because I've never had interference of that was the logic system that I started with. So I never had to unlearn so much as a lot of these other coaches and stuff had. And then a weird thing happened because Louie was getting up there in age. The business was growing. He's getting up there in age. He's a little more, he was a little more crotchety. There's just more sort of hoops and hurdles to get him on the phone. A lot of these coaches started reaching directly to me, and they, guys who I had met we'd have these conversations, and they go oh man, where did you go to school? Where do you work with? And I'm like, oh, I went to FSU. And they'd be like, oh, so-and-so. And I'm like, no, I went there for film. I don't have a degree in this. I don't have a CSCS. I don't, everything that I have is very experiential, but I went to the primary sources. I traveled the literal globe and I watched coaches in person. And I'm like, and I didn't just take notes. I took a camera and I watched it back in 4K over and over again. And like I had this, like, making a documentary is a very immersive process. And so from July 3rd, 2014 until, the movie was, I turned in my final edit somewhere around like January 6th, 2019. For that, 4.5 year span, I did not take a single day off of researching, and when I say researching, I mean like actively reading books or speaking to the people that wrote the books or being in person in the gym. Again, I graduated top of my class at FSU within a very competitive program. And like, I can tell you from that, like, I didn't study very hard to do that. I studied about as hard as most college kids study, which is to say I was incredibly distracted. I was, like, I had 12 to 15 hours worth of classes. Like, that's a part-time job. Like, you would never say like, well, I've worked at Dairy Queen for, 18 months part-time while flirting with the girl, who ran the register. So I'm pretty much Gordon Ramsay now. You would never do that. But like, that's how, like, that's sort of how the average college, again, I have a degree and I've taught college classes before, like, but that's how a lot of people kind of view like the education is like, well, I checked that box and so now I'm a master or an expert. And the reality is like, no, everything that I did and learned, like, I was also on the flip side of it having to get paid at the end of it. I was like, I am betting on all of this. So I'm much more attuned. I'm passionate about it and it's fun to me. So like, I finished the movie finally in 2019. I know all this stuff. Most of it I can't put in the movie. I'm still reaching out to coaches. I'm still having these questions and talking to people even after the movie's done. And then I moved back to Tallahassee and one of my old friends from high school says, hey man, I just signed up to be a booster basically at our old high school. They are terrible now. And he's like, you remember that place? We're having a nostalgic conversation. He's like, man, you should go like run the weight room for them. And I was like, well, if they'd have me, like, I literally have nothing to do right now. I'm trying to figure out what do I do. Just like, that movie is done. I'm doing this other movie, but I'm also at a crossroads where I'm like, I'm not really having a lot of fun making movies. And like, I hate the movie by the time it comes out. I haven't watched Westside vs. the World since January of 2019.
It's funny you say that because like you hear that a lot out of people like in that field, or at least I have. Where you like, I didn't realize like Chevy Chase had never watched Christmas Vacation. Like I didn't learn that until like last year.
Yeah,
and I just think that's very interesting.
Yeah,
I guess you're too close to it to understand the relevance, which I guess every great artist is. That makes sense.
Yeah, the only difference is I edited it, so I've watched it. I've watched it until it's burnt into my eyelids. Like y'all get to watch the fun like 88 or 93 minute version of it.
The fun part.
I'm like, I have like the 7-hour version in my head, and I can't get it out, and I would like it to leave.
Right. So you've got like so you've got this. All of this leads up to you launching this new OVR company, and like it's funny because it's all velocity based training, which you got to spend countless hours with the person who, I don't want to say invented it, but who popularized it at least.
Yeah, definitely in the West.
So, exactly. And so, like, I guess just let's talk about what OVR is actually doing, and how your devices are, I guess, different than the norm.
Yeah. Well, so it all goes back like to right where I was getting to was that transition. So I started coaching at this high school. It was just a free thing to do for a few hours, a couple afternoons a week. And after the first day, I told my wife, like, I don't know if I'm going to go back. They're a mess. And after the second or third day, I told my wife, I was like, this is so much fun. I don't want to make movies anymore. And she's heard me say crazy things before, like, hey, I know I don't have any money, but I think I'm going to make a movie about a powerlifting gym. And she's like, well, that turned out okay, so I can't dismiss the insane things that come out of your mouth. So she's like, whatever you want to do, but like, we still have bills to pay. Like, there has to be a business. Like, you have to make money somehow. And she's like, will the school pay you? And I go, we're in Florida. No, it's a public school. They don't have money. Like, no, they'll offer for me to be a teacher, and that'll be awful. I don't want to do that. So I thought about it, and around that same time period, I was doing some marketing consulting for some people who were doing a lot of business in the powerlifting and bodybuilding space. And they were like, well, do you have any ideas? Like, have you ever thought about sort of applying your kind of marketing principles to something maybe in another field? And then one of them just said, like, I don't know, like, this guy was talking to me about this combine training system. And I was like, yo, you should see what I do with these high school kids. Like, we have timing gates and, VBT and jump devices, because I had Netflix money back then. I was flush. So all the toys that I bought were for the kids. And I had some kids who were doing some very freaky things like that. So like this kid here, he was the #1 long jumper in the country in 2021 in high school. He broke the state of Florida record. He went from like a mid 23, which is like a state champion caliber jumper, to 25.5 and a half, which was state record in Florida. And we're a good track state. So that was a tough record. No other kid, I think, that year jumped over 24.8. So he not only improved, he was already elite, and he improved by a lot. And that landed him at FSU, and he's a senior now. But my wife said, like, you have to figure out how to make money. And then, my wheels got to turning, and I was like, I bought all this stuff and I paid way too much money for it because, number one, none of the products felt finished. They're all wonky. I was like, in any other field, like, 'cause I have camera equipment and stuff, and I'm like, it doesn't make any sense that I can buy a camera for $800 that is 10 to 50 times more complex than this VBT unit over here that costs $1,500. Like, the software that came with the camera cost multiple millions to produce, and I'm like, this software over here is garbage. Like, a spreadsheet is better. And so I got to talking to one of my partners, and I basically started to convince him that like, if we could make something that coaches could actually afford, and like, sort of the guiding principle being, imagine if as a coach, because you're probably not getting enough support from your school, in most schools, and again, I'm from a no income tax state. A lot of people love it for that reason, but it's hard on the schools. I'm like, we can't afford to buy nice, shiny things. But there's a lot of coaches who they'll come out of pocket for stuff. But my guiding principle was, if I got to come out of pocket more than $300, I have to tell my wife. Right? Like, and I have to justify it if it's over that. But man, if it was like,
make sure my wife doesn't listen to this episode.
Yeah. But I was like, man, if it was like $299, I might, I might get an eye roll, but right. I don't need a lawyer. So, like, I can get out of the doghouse pretty quick if it's, if it sounds reasonable. And I was like, but a lot of this stuff, like, it's so expensive, so then no one gets to see it. And since you don't get to see it, you don't feel comfortable ever buying it. And I was like, but what if it was all these websites, they hide the prices, you got to, it looks great, and then you scroll down and you scroll down and you scroll down and you scroll down. It's like, book a call to hear more. And I was like, man, why can't we just sell like how are they selling Apple Watches for less than this? Like, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so sure enough, looked into it and was like, we just have to, like, there's sort of a minimum market that we have to justify, and then we can get the prices down this low. And it's a big gamble, but again, I came from a field where it was like, well, if I can just raise, a couple $100,000 to make a movie about a powerlifting gym in Columbus, Ohio, about a 7-year-old man, then, sure, people will line up to see that, right? like, oh, if I just make a movie about like Bill Clinton's cardiologist, I'm sure like that'll make like $30 million. It's like, no, I had done such ridiculous sounding things already that I was like, no, there's a way to like get investment behind things of far greater absurdity. And I'm like, there are coaches out there who are just dying to like play with these kinds of toys. And the problem is, like, no one finishes, jump mats weigh 35 pounds and they break the second you move them because they were never meant to actually move. If you do order something, it's on back order for like 6 months. And it's just like,
can I give you?
Yeah.
Can I bring up just another limitation of a jump mat, because I know where this is going, and it's not against the quality of the jump mat. I mean, they're fine, but we find while they might measure accurately, the athletes who use them, when we're trying to use them to jump, the athlete's so concerned about jumping from and landing on that mat, that they don't really get their maximum jump.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you can picture that, I'm concerned. I'm not going to hit that mat. I've got to, I got to hold something back. So that's a real. I mean, I see that every time we use it. So anyway, I'm sorry. Please continue.
Oh well, you need to get an OVR jump, and you will, because eventually that jump mat is going to break because some kid's going to pull the cord of it like a cat,
right?
And it's just going to yank the cord out. But we got you covered when that happens.
But actually, based on that too, and you can circle back to this later. It's like I did want to ask you about how your OVR jump systems work, because it does look like it's a very thin angle that you have to hit. Like a lot of kids can't even jump straight up and down. They're going 4 inches forward or 4 inches backwards. So like, how does your unit compensate for that?
Well, so number one, it's 18 inches wide. And it does create sort of like a pizza slice shape. So you think...
Okay, that's kind of what I thought when I saw it, yeah.
So you said forward and back?
Yeah, I mean, you'll see... I mean, especially some, high school kids.
Yeah.
I mean,
how often,
jump a couple inches forward.
How often do they jump like 9 inches, like, to the side?
Right, exactly.
Right? So you put the 18-inch side in front of them, say in front of their right foot. You tell them, put your right foot in the pizza slice. And you can put the other end up to 30, 35 feet away, so you can have a huge space. They also Bluetooth together, so you can link. I mean, I put 17 of them together before, so I've carpeted the entirety of a room. So it can expand to. I mean, you buy 3 of them, it's going to cost you less than most of the other jump mats that are out there, and you suddenly can create a zone that is much larger. I've been doing a project with Tony Villani, creating a zone, reading with some of their draft guys, reading the ground contact times and stuff. So it weighs 1.5 pounds. It can, if you've got like Jinko jeans from the 90s and 2000s, you could put them in your pocket. I carry like 12 of them in my backpack to school every day. But it's actually, I've got like one of these. So this is one of our test ones. This is probably like 2 years old at this point. But so put this in front, put this behind.
Yeah, for those on audio, it's like a rectangle that's maybe 2 inches thick or so. And
yeah,
there's a long one and a short one.
Yeah. But yeah, if they're jumping, they're generally going to go forwards or backwards. Yeah. So the way that I set it up,
the bar's long enough there to where you can, like I said, pizza slice it.
Yeah. So what I do in our gym with the kids, and my kids range from 6th grade to I had a couple D1 linebackers there the other day. But I'll put it like on a crack we'll jump a lot of times on this big concrete patio right outside of our weight room, because our weight room's very small and we have a lot of kids. But I'll put it like perpendicular on the crack and tell the kids, tell the 6th grade boys, who are the worst training subjects in the world. Like they are, it's like training squirrels. But I'll set it up kind of with one of the cracks, one of the seams between the big pads of concrete, so that it's perpendicular to that screen, and then just say, jump with your right foot on that screen or on that line. So they put their right foot on the line, then they jump. This is doing standing verticals. So the assumption is they're taking off and landing, both feet basically simultaneous. But if that was still an issue, then we'd just create a 36-inch zone, move the other side back, so it'd be about 8 feet away. So you'd have this giant triangle. And then I've got a whole bunch of other setups. Sometimes we'll do like approach jumps, and I'll make an even larger, like a.
I was getting ready to ask you, can you measure that with yours?
Yeah. Cool. Or I'll
Okay.
put like 6 of them together, and we can do ground contact time on a fly 10 as they sprint through the zone with lasers up, and now you got a 9-foot zone, and you don't have to worry about, like where they step or whatever. We do a lot of hurdle hops where I've got a really cool on our YouTube. I've got a long form like hurdle hop system video where I talk about how I measure elasticity and stuff. We'll put hurdles, say, at every 3 feet. We've got a broad jump mat that's specifically designed for how I like to do hurdle hops. We just keep making toys that are like...
That broad jump mat was such a great idea.
Yeah.
Like so simple, but so ingenious, too.
Yeah. Well, the whole, like, taking off, not standing on it, because your foot kicks it out. Like, on most of the broad jump mats, most of the slip comes from the takeoff. When you're landing, you're landing slower than you're taking off, so you're coming back down to zero, so you have less horizontal force when you hit the mat than when you take off. So it's like, well, we solved most of the slippage simply by jumping from off of it. And then
What a novel concept.
yeah. And then with the way that like we do hurdle hops, I'll use increments, say, of like 3 feet and an 18-inch hurdle. And I'll put the jumps in between, the OVR jumps in between reading ground contact time. So I'll tell them, if you can get over, 5 hurdles or 6 hurdles with 5 ground contact zones, and your slowest ground contact zone, those 5 bounces, your slowest one is still under 0.15, then we'll extend it a little. So then we'll move them from 3-foot zones to 4-foot zones. Repeat. They're still going faster. Okay. Then we'll go to 5-foot zones. We'll go to 6-foot, 7-foot, 8-foot, 9-foot zones. I've had a girl go through and on 8-foot zones, she's a 9-foot plus broad jumper, but she'll go through repeated bounds with hurdles that are 8 feet apart. But so now, because that mat has no tag end, we can just line up 1, 2, 3. We can put 60 feet of mats out there on the sidewalk and, very quickly extend it out or shorten it or move it around.
And all the time measuring, making sure that your ground contact time doesn't fall out of the zone you're wanting to, using your lasers on one end and using your jump mat on the other, and just having that. Yeah, that's pretty cool. It's good. Great idea.
That is. So I have another question for you here as we get close to wrapping this up. We only got a couple minutes left. One of the things that I guess, a lot of companies are doing, and I mean, they have a back end to it, right? And we've seen a bunch of different platforms, on the backside of it. I mean, what does OVR's backside platform look like? I mean, do you have a database where you can log all this, or are you just getting numbers up on a screen? Do you have an app? How's that work? Just for the coaches that are just now hearing about OVR through this.
Yeah. So right now we have a free app. There's no subscription. The app is mainly targeted towards the single user, so it doesn't have a team mode currently. Currently probably being an operative word there. But you can use, what I've found is that most of the colleges that we go and visit, most of the coaches that we talk to, most of them do not, like our biggest competition is the Just Jump Mat, right? Which has no app and there's no API, there's no connectivity. And it's like, well, that's the thing that still, at least until we came along, was beating everyone else. So it's like, so clearly that's not a big limiter for people of, like keeping track of things like their jumps outside of
Right.
of another app. But
yeah, just use a spreadsheet or whatever where they put other data. Sure.
Yeah, but you guys do have at least like a single user.
Yeah, we have a single user,
Okay,
and you can definitely, every unit has a screen on the unit.
And is that connected to all your units? Like, can you keep track of like your Tendo work on that?
Yeah.
Or I say Tendo.
Yeah.
Can
For
you
our
do that?
velocity.
Okay.
Yeah. Every OVR product, current and upcoming, all links in through the same app. You learn one, sort of language and system, one interface, and you have control over everything. You can, pull up. So if you're like in a private facility, for example, the profiles are all free. So, if you're in a situation where you allow kids to use their phone, you could just have that every kid has their own app and has their own, system that way. I'm in a huge chaotic team setting, and I don't even use the app or the tablets, and we don't use tablets or phones because they just get destroyed or become distractions. So for us, like, if we're doing box squats with VBT, and we want to make sure that our bar speeds are, hitting a threshold of 0.6 meters per second on average, then our side spotter is going to be calling the speed off of the display on the unit, squat to squat. Now, eventually, assuming that OVR does well, and I can put a very robust tablet mount on every rack, then we'll have it truly gamified up where the squatter can see it themselves, as they finish each rep. Boom, there's my score. Now I'm going to try and beat it on the next one. Boom, just driving intent up. But you can use it, if you and your buddies all want to use it at the gym, you throw it in sandbox mode and you're not really recording any data. You're just, using it as a big display in competition, or maybe using some enhanced features off of the app, but the app's all free. And if you are, a single user or something, you're just you and your headphones, and, you're logging everything in the app. The app will store it all for you. It's got a video overlay function that, again, is free. If you want to, log your PR jump or your PR lift, or shortly, so your PR and a few other things, and you want to have the overlay in there so that everyone knows it's legit and official, and, there's proof of it, and share it quick to all the platforms. That's all there. Yeah, we try to make everything easy and simple.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys have definitely found a niche in the market for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
No
I think
doubt.
a lot of us as a private facility owner and as a high school coach as well, price has always been an issue. So, man, I'm looking forward to digging into it a little bit more and checking it out. Where can coaches and athletes and parents, where can they find you?
They can find OVR Performance at OVR Performance on all of the social media platforms. Go to OVRperformance.com and buy some stuff. For me, you can find, I've got a couple different, if you want to reach out to me on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, my coaching account is Burn the Ladders, which again goes back to sort of a Buddy Morris, rant against speed ladders and things. Although literally today I was making the world's biggest ladder. But I only like ladders if they're really big, but we all have to get into tree houses somehow, so they still have a place.
Right.
Or your attic, you might want to go with something firmer, maybe a metal or a fiberglass in that case. But
Right.
Burn the Ladders on Instagram or Twitter, X, whatever they call it these days, or Westside Film. I also have a YouTube channel that I don't know, just look up Westside versus the World and look for whatever channel the trailer is on. That's probably also Westside Film or something. Yeah, I'm super easy to find. Pop in my DMs. If you leave me a message that requires more than a few words to answer, you're going to get a long, rambling voice note. They're free. It's like a personalized podcast that probably goes in multiple parts. and is usually going to be a lot more than you bargained for, but I'm glad to give it.
Cool. Well, man, I appreciate you joining. Thanks for all you've done.
Yeah, no
both
problem.
from the movie and bringing a new product to the market, and we wish it well and the best. And yeah, bro, it was good to talk to you, man.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks for
very
having
much.
me.
Thanks for coming on, man. Guys, y'all know the deal. Share the show, pay your dues, and share it. Peace.